FPL is back, and here is my first draft in the new game. Now, in terms of goalkeepers and defenders, I think with my goalkeeper, I've gone with Steele so far. You know, he seemed to be the nailed starting Brighton keeper towards the end of last season. I think Sanchez must have fallen out with De Zerbi in some way. And to be honest, I'm expecting Brighton to be making a sale on Sanchez. And hopefully Steele retains his place at the start of next season. There are other 4.5 million keeper options, likes of Sam Johnson, should he, cement his place in the Crystal Palace team, likes of Leno and Pickford as well. So we're not short of 4.5 million keepers. To start with, I'm going for Steele. If he does start the season, in my opinion at least, he's by far and away the strongest. Brighton are a good defence and they've got a good set of fixtures to start things off with. Only thing is, we'll wait and see in pre-season whether he is the starting Brighton keeper. Trent Alexander-Arnold, I think, picks himself, really. 8 million is probably the most expensive. I think it is the most expensive we've ever seen him in FPL, but I'm not letting that put me off going for him. I think he's a great option, and comparing him to midfielders of his price, should he be playing in midfield himself in that inverted midfield role for Liverpool, I think, he could challenge double-digit goals and assists next season. I really do think that. And with Liverpool making some key signings in midfield, I do expect them to get better defensively as well. Estupinian, I don't really need to say a lot about him. I think he's one of the best defenders in the game for that price. 5 million, same price as Zinchenko, of course. I think those two in general are the best two at that price. As I said with Steele, really, I think Brighton are a good-looking defence and they've got a good set of fixtures to start things off with. Estupinian's the strongest of the lot. He's the most attacking, and Lewis Dunk comes in at 5 million as well. So I just don't see why you'd pick Dunk over Estupinian. If Dunk was 4.5, it'd give you something to think about, but in this occasion, it really doesn't, and I've gone for Estupinian. And it's a similar story with Zinchenko, really. He comes in slightly cheaper than some of the other Arsenal defenders, and for me, that's a bit shocking, really. I mean, 5 million is just absolutely unbelievable value for him. He's the most attacking of all of the Arsenal defenders. Arsenal, one of the best defences in the league. He's pretty much nailed in that team as well. I know today, Fabrizio Romano's been saying the Timber deal was pretty much done for Arsenal, but Timber is either a right back or a centre back. He's not going to be challenging Zinchenko for that position, which makes me think Zinchenko, at least every game he's fit for, he's probably going to play. Now into the money positions, the midfielders and the forwards. I've gone for a 3-5-2 with this team. Having picked Haaland up front, obviously you kind of have to go with Erling Haaland. I don't really need to talk about him. Beyond that, and Harry Kane, I'm not massively inspired by the striking options. I've been a bit naughty as well. I've gone for Evan Ferguson, who a couple of videos ago is on the thumbnail of players to avoid. He's obviously a rotation risk, but you'll see on my bench I've got some cover should he not play. But I feel like there's a real shortage of good strikers. Jesus is a good option at 8 million, but he's just a little bit too expensive to squeeze in this team. Things might change though as time goes on, and there's one key player in that midfield, Heung-min Son. I've gone with Ferguson as sort of a sacrifice, really, in order to get Son in. Personally, I really believe in Son to have a really strong season this time round. The couple seasons ago that he got the Golden Boot was the last time we really saw a firing fit Heung-min Son. Last season, it came out in the wash that he had a stomach hernia. I believe he's fully recovered from that now. And with the signing of Maddison as well, I really do think Spurs are going to turn things up in an attacking perspective. And last season, they weren't actually too bad for scoring goals. It was just their defence that let them down. So I'm really heavily backing Son to have a good season. Saka, I'm a bit disappointed really in FPL's price for him. 8.5 million for, in my opinion at least, the best Arsenal midfielder. His attacking stats outmatched both Odegaard and Martinelli. He scored a similar level of goals to them, but got more assists than both, and he's on penalties, and his expected numbers behind it were even stronger as well. So for me, he's the strongest Arsenal midfielder. And one thing to consider about Saka as well is Havertz signing for Arsenal. A lot of people saying he's going to play deeper midfield, which is probably the case, but he can also play on the left-hand side and at number 10. So, he's a threat to both Odegaard and Martinelli's place in the team, whereas they don't really have any right-sided players beyond Saka. So I really do feel like Saka's going to be nailed, have a good season and still take the penalties. Rashford, he could be a bit touch and go really, with Bruno Fernandes coming in at 8.5 million. I think remains to be seen how the season goes to start with. I'm going to back Rashford because he got more attacking returns last season basically, and in my opinion was the better player. But if Bruno can really turn things up, in a midfield partnership with Mount on those penalties for Man United, it could be a bit of a swap there. Maddison obviously had a fantastic season last year under Leicester, despite them getting relegated and not being really any good at all. I think Spurs are better going forward than Leicester were. I think he slots into that team quite nicely, and he starts pretty much every game that he's fit for, certainly in my opinion anyway. He makes a great option, and it's 7.5 million. I think that's a fantastic price. The fact that he's cheaper playing for a better team than he was last season playing for Leicester is a bit of a joke, to be honest, and I think he's going to be really popular. He certainly made my team. And then Bumo, I've spoken about him on my players to buy video, but I really do feel like he's going to become the Brentford talisman this season. You know, take the penalties, take the glory from Tony, certainly until January when Tony comes back. Whistle will play up front, and Buemo, like on the leftish hand side. The two of them seem to make a really good partnership when there's no Tony. And I really do think Mbeumo is going to have a great season. I'm conscious I've said his name differently in both. As I said, there's not much to be said for Erling Haaland, really. I think 14 million, he's still priced low enough that it doesn't really put me off. And he is such an obvious captain for that first game week, Burnley away. I don't think you can avoid him. And my general point on Haaland is, if he has a good game week to start things off, and you don't have him, you can almost put yourself out of the running in FPL straight away. So for me, I'd rather stick with the pack at the start. So I've gone for him, and I'm captaining him. And here is how the team looks as a whole. So you've seen the 11. I've gone for Areola on the bench, one of the funniest names in football, but purely because I think he could find his way playing for West Ham, or at least starting for them next season. I think Fabianski, in the nicest way possible, is getting on a bit. I think he's 38, 39 years old. This could either be his last season at West Ham, or he could get a move in the summer. Who knows? I don't think they're going to sell him, to be honest, but I do feel like Areola could force himself into that West Ham starting 11. And certainly when looking at the list of 4.0 goalkeepers, he's the standout for me. I've gone for Botman, who I think is just the safest, easiest 4.5 million defensive pick. There are others, the likes of Rico Henry and all the Crystal Palace defenders as well. Someone like Mitchell, Guehi might find their way in my team later on. But for me, Botman had a really good season last year, transformed that Newcastle defence. I'm not sure, it depends on, to be honest, who else they sign. I think the signing of Tonali might make them even more solid. So yeah, they might be keeping more clean sheets than they did last year, which makes Botman a really good option. I think in general, as I said, he's the safest of the 4.5 million defenders. And, you know, if you're worried about Ferguson, well, certainly I'm a little bit worried about Ferguson not starting some of the games. Having someone like Botman on the bench to come in as a nice, safe option, I think is a good idea. Then we've got Baldock. So far, at least, I think he's the strongest of the 4 million defenders. There's a guy from Burnley and Bell from Luton. Both of them come in at 4 million. I think Baldock's probably the strongest, purely because he plays in a wing-back position for Sheffield United. Played over 30 games in the Championship in that position. And if you remember when he came to the Premier League first time round with Sheffield United, he was a really good budget option then, and hopefully continue that next season. Now, Antoine Semenyo is the 4.5 million striker I've gone for. My club, Bristol City, sold him to Bournemouth in January last year for a club record fee. I think he's going to force his way into that Bournemouth team. I think he's too good of a player and was too big of a sign-in not to be playing for them. I know they're going to be under a new manager next season. Hopefully he can force himself into that Bournemouth team. And at 4.5 million, I think he could be great value. Another player to keep an eye on, especially if he leaves Arsenal for another Premier League team, is Balogun. He had an absolutely amazing season in League One. And if he does end up signing for another Premier League team, he's an absolute shoo-in at that price. And to be honest, probably makes this starting 11 over Ferguson. And that's the end of the video. My first draft in the new official FPL game. If you enjoyed it, please leave me a like rating on the video and subscribe to the Golden Goal channel just there. I'll have plenty more FPL and football related content coming out before the season starts. So stick around to see some more.